Map of Lost Places panel. My name is Leslie Connor, one of the editors for the Map of Lost Places, which is currently kickstarting over on Kickstarter. I am editing this anthology with Cherie Renee Thomas, and I am joined today with three of our anchor authors. The Map of Lost Places is a travel guide to hauntings and the haunted lands with their own power and the communities that spring from these strange realms. Panelists, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly?
Okay, I'll go. Hey, everybody. So my name is Celeste Rita Baker. I write, of course, fantasy, magical realism. I don't think I write horror, but some people have told me that some of the things I've written have been pretty horrific. So I try not to label my own work because I don't know what it is. I often write in Caribbean dialect. I sometimes write in standard American English. Um, so far, I'm having a ball doing it.
I'll go. I'm LP Kindred, Chicagoan Angelino. I write science fiction, fantasy, and horror. The horror is usually about the dystopia of being marginalized. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Brian Keene, dialing in from Pennsylvania. I write horror, crime, fantasy, science fiction, nonfiction, comic books. Basically, if there's a paycheck in it, I'm willing to write it.
All right, so let's go ahead and start off by talking about place, because the anthology is the Map of Lost Places, and that we're discussing, we're going and discovering strange places. So can you briefly discuss like how a sense of place impacts the way in which you tell a story?
Well, for me, it's because I live right now in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, but I've lived for the past 30-something years in New York City, and I've lived in several other places in on the continent, in America, in the United States. So stories for me don't usually start with a place; they start with a person, and that person will then determine where they are, and I'll have to work it from there. Like there was a story that I was writing that I really, really thought was based here on St. Thomas on the island. But when I started writing the story, my paragraphs would shift to Harlem, New York. And I'd be like, wait a minute, this is not where we are supposed to be. So yeah, my places can be pretty erratic.
I think I'm the same way. I start with the concept, and after the concept, I have to think about the people in the space, and then I have to think about what place would make this make the most sense, and not like in a logical way, but more in like a feel way for the characters. But yeah, place is super central because it can change the entire texture of the piece. There's so much subtext that happens when a location is interacting with a character, and I think it's inextricable.
Yeah, same for me. I think back, use two of my zombie novels, for example, Dead Sea and Entombed. Ostensibly, they're both just riffing on things Romero did, 50 years ago, but Dead Sea is very much set in Fells Point and Druid Hill Park, Baltimore neighborhoods. And if you tried to set Entombed there, it wouldn't work, versus Entombed, which is of course set confined in an old military bunker in West Virginia. The setting for both dictate the events of the novel, dictate the people in the novel. Those characters, what makes makes their background up is very dependent upon those places. I don't usually start with a place like LP said. I get my idea. I usually have an opening sentence and a good idea, and I kind of know who my characters are, and then I start thinking about, okay, where should we set this?
So
So do you find that, I'm sorry,
go ahead. No.
do you find that you need your character to have grown up and in that location, or can they be more transitory?
No, I think it depends. It depends a lot on the story itself. And in fact, I have done that with Darkness, or no, a Gathering of Crows, for example. The character is transitory. He's an Amish guy in suburban Virginia. Very different environment for him, and that actually ends up in informing parts of the novel, parts of his anxiety and fear. But I definitely need to know who my characters are before I write the first word.
So moving from place, can you talk about the ways in which cultural traditions influence the craft of your storytelling? For example, I lost my notes. Hold on. For example, how might a tradition of oral history translate to written stories, TV, or movies?
I've been working on this in my own practice, trying to think about ways that I can represent that in a fixed way. Western civilization is very obsessed with the idea of taking a story and locking it down, versus an oral tradition where a story has the opportunity to grow and shift for the needs of the audience, right? And so I've kind of been exploring that in my work, in like kind of iterative storytelling in like a short story collection context. But also I think that when things are orally told, or when you're writing a story like the oral tradition, not in the oral, when I'm trying to mimic the oral tradition, what I do frequently is first person, big personality, and let those idiosyncrasies tell the story while also telling on themselves.
That's an interesting way to look at it, to think about it, about trying to get the oral onto the page, and what you just said now about a big personality, like the storyteller standing in front of you. I never thought of it that way. That does make it sound a lot more fun to read and to write, because it's when you're trying to do oral storytelling on the page, to me, I have never tried to do that. I am not sure I can do that, because orally, when you're, as a storyteller, you're getting feedback from the people in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and with the way that we do it, when we just put our words out there and we have no idea if the person is reading it in the bathtub or wherever they are, you don't get any feedback. You don't know whether they're laughing, smiling, bored, throwing the book across the room or what. So I really like the idea of trying to think of it in terms of being big and as you said, idiosyncratic, and having a lot of personality in the storytelling, so that at least, yes, we as the writer are there alone, but we've got all these other people in our head too doing the feedback.
It just hit me as I was reading these questions, because our slush team and Leah Ning helped put the questions together for this panel today. We actually have a story in Apex Mag, the current issue of Apex Magazine, that fits this really well, by Victor Forna, where it is a story with an oral storyteller who is the story keeps changing in reaction to another character in the story, and so yeah, it can be done very, very, very well, but it's difficult.
Definitely that.
I think LP hit it with the first person and the big personality. That can really help bring a character or something like an oral tradition to life. And there are things that we don't think of as oral storytelling, but as Celeste was talking, I realized I've done it. Think about my father and his buddies that he served with in Vietnam. Uh, when I was a kid, there must have been 20 guys. And I think there's exactly 3 of them left now. And I've grown up hearing the stories of the guys who made it home. His best friend, who he went from boot camp to getting out same day together. His best friend's experience coming home was he went back to Detroit, and all of his friends, all of his people were calling him an Uncle Tom and this and that. For him, coming home was in some ways worse, more heartbreaking than Vietnam. And I think of another friend of my dad's who was a tunnel rat, and all the stories he told me, which I thought was the neatest thing in the world when I was 12 years old. All of those stories have ended up working their way into things I've written. It occurs to me, maybe I should have asked their permission to do that, but I didn't. But those guys aren't with us anymore. And yet that part of them, I guess, does live on through fiction. So
What is a tunnel rat?
a tunnel rat, in a nutshell, the Vietnamese would dig tunnels under the jungle. And they would pop up in the middle of the night and, cut enemy combatants' throat or kidnap you, drag you down in. And the tunnel rat, their job was to go down into these tunnels armed with only a handgun and some explosives and, blow them up, take them out, search them, look for booby traps. It was a very dangerous and very lonely job. Like I said, sounds so cool when you're 12 years old, but as an adult, you realize, oh yeah,
Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
So how did different cultures shape the definitions and tropes of horror?
LP, that's on you.
That's a good question. Yeah, you got to start it, LP.
I just get to ask the hard questions today. It's awesome.
I wasn't far. Yeah, in my introduction, I said that generally when I'm writing horror, I'm writing the horror of being marginalized. And not to say that being marginalized is only horrific, but when we talk about dystopia, or when I started dealing with the word dystopia, it felt incongruous because I'm like, what is dystopia to, a group of people who were forcibly displaced, who live in a country that demanded labor but denies personhood, right? And so there are a lot of different ways to explore that as a Black person. There are a lot of different ways to explore that as a gay person. My stories are generally about trying to find ways that the intersections of identities can multiply the weight of those horrors. My story, Your Rover Is Here, was reprinted in Apex, and it is essentially about a person whose the intersections of his identity are a Gen heritage and being a Black person. And when he's driving rideshare and someone gets into his car with less than, beneficent intentions, he has to make the decision to sacrifice his livelihood, his car, in order to stop this person from doing harm to a bunch of people. And he's not sure if this person is simply racist, simply speciesist, but he has to do a thing. And in the end, there's no reward for doing the right thing in his situation, because maybe someone with a different set of intersections might have found reward, How to lose it all.
I would agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think what I've noticed personally as I'm getting older, I mean, written what, I think 50 some books now, Leslie, something like that. Who knows how many short stories. I find as I'm getting older, I'm trying to find commonality. It occurred to me this summer, I was out to lunch with Rath James White, Maurice Broaddus, Cheshire Burke. The four of us were eating. And it occurred to me that when we started out together, if you said, who are the writers of color in the horror genre? It would have been the three of them and Linda Addison and Jesus Gonzalez, J.F. Gonzalez. And that was it. How amazing is it that here we are 30 years later and the landscape has completely changed, and you have all these new voices with all these different perspectives and different stories to tell coming in, and all that's being injected in the mainstream, and no one can ever take that away. And what I find myself doing is pulling all that in as a reader, as a fan, and as a creator, and saying, all right, so where's the commonality in these stories? You know, what are the things, particularly in horror, what are the things we all fear? And I seem to be examining that a lot more here at age 56 than I was at age 30, you know.
So what are your findings? What do you think we are all fearing?
Well, I mean, we all know what it's like to get our hearts broken. We all fear finding that lump in our breast or somewhere else in our body. You know, we all fear that the world is spinning out of our control and we don't know what to do about it. You know, if you're a parent, we all have those inherent fears that come with raising a child. But you know, we all know how it feels when a puppy dog licks your face, or what it's like to fall in love. So there are good things that we all have in common too. But yeah, I don't know. For myself, I seem to be, I'm not even sure how to articulate it, let alone write it yet, but I seem to be trying to build something with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I love to hear that, like, you aren't just stagnating and saying, well, this is my circle, my world, and you don't need to look beyond that. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I always get stuck with people. Well, the people outside of work who are like, either it's like they read one thing and one thing only, right? Or they're like, I don't read, which just makes my heart cry. But whereas I'm on the other end, I'm like, how can I read as many stories from as many perspectives and as many authors as quickly as possible? Because as I'm getting older and I'm looking at all of the books that I've bought and the gigantic stack of library holds that is directly beyond my laptop right now, like, I can't read quick enough to feel like I'm getting to consume enough stories from as many places as possible. Like, do I occasionally want a cozy mystery novel where I know exactly every beat that's going to happen along the way? Yeah, but I want more than that too. And I wish that we could get more people to that. I mean, there's a lot of chat, and I feel like I'm rambling. With like editors and making sure that you have stories from a wide variety of authors. And as the editor-in-chief at Apex Magazine, I don't see that that's a problem. Like, I don't go looking specifically for a diverse group of authors. It happens naturally by reading so many stories. You're finding these stories from so many different perspectives. I don't want to publish the same story over and over again, right?
Right.
So when I hear someone say, oh, well, I don't understand how to do it, I'm like, you're not trying.
I think some of it might be a generational thing too.
Yeah.
You know, when I look at my youngest son is 15, when I look at his peer group, those of them who are readers or, you know, lovers of the genre as far as film or video games or things like that go, they have a much broader spectrum of what they're consuming than, say, somebody my age would. And to them, it doesn't even occur to them that this is available. For them, this is the way it's always been. So how awesome is that,
Yeah.
I
When
can often be
Huh?
sorry. I can often be found on the internet railing about the morass that is canon, and not because like great works of fiction don't deserve to be venerated and studied and rhapsodized about, but it just seems to me like it's the same 250 or 300 texts, right? Uh, and when we talk about like English language texts, in college you do or if you're an English major you do a course and a half in like British literature and then American literature and then specific authors in or specific movements in those. But I was like, well, yeah, but we don't spend enough time thinking about translated literature. We don't think about the ramifications of those kinds of criteria or prerequisites when, for X amount of time certain people weren't allowed to read, let alone write, and no one was reading their work. And we don't think about translation of like old Japanese texts, like ancient Japanese texts or Korean texts, or take your pick. And so when we're looking at it through those contexts, it's like there's a whole world with a range of perspectives on anything and everything that we can think of. And we keep returning. I'm on the soapbox. We keep returning. We keep returning to Chaucer. We keep returning to Milton. We keep returning to patterns of speech that are foreign to us, the way that we speak today. We have to learn to read them so that we can read these texts, and kind of obfuscating the fact that there are people who've written really great things since then, or an exception to these things. And that particular range bothers the shit out of me.
As someone who got a degree in English 20 years ago, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I guess that's why now I'm like, please let me read as widely and as possible. And like I just want to be able to consume books as quickly as I can because there's so much out there that I haven't read,
Mhm.
and I read a lot. Which makes me just baffled when people are like, "Oh, I don't read." I'm like, "How can you not read? Look at all this amazing stuff."
Yeah.
The
But yeah,
Locust recommended reading list is like a joy when it comes out, but also it's the bane of my existence because I'm not gonna catch up.
oh,
Full
I'll
stop.
never. I'm gonna die with so many books unread. It's sad.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you feel like you have to read faster, that you want to consume everything that's out there.
But see, I do. I do want to consume. Like, I'm just afraid that I'm missing something that's gonna like change my entire perspective on the world. You know what I mean? Like I want to go
Right.
out and read and not even that. I'm going to miss a book that I just loved if I don't get to read it. And I just always feel like I can't read enough.
Right.
Ooh, can we do something really quickly?
Sure.
Can we like list 3 books that like change the way that we think about books?
Yeah, I
That's a
mean,
great idea.
now I feel like I need to take notes and I don't have paper.
That's all right. We have a chat on the side. I can type. I can go first because it was my idea. Give y'all
Yeah.
like 6 seconds to think about it. I really love Sequoia Nagamatsu's How High We Go in the Dark.
Mm.
It changed the way that I think about the intersections of a novel and a short story collection. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I really love Cadwell Turnbull's the new book is We Are the Crisis, but the first one is No Gods, No Monsters. It is a collectivist text, and I had been thinking about how to write collectivism versus individualism for like about a year, and I was like, I don't really know how to like conceptualize this on paper, and he did it, and my mind was just destroyed. And I think I always come back. I always come back to the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin, uh, because the twist in that is very twisty and lovely. But I was amazed by the way that she was able to capture a life while building a world, and I didn't feel like I was being info dumped. It was just it was resplendent. Yeah, it was great.
Celeste, do you have yours? Because I'm still thinking about mine.
Okay, yeah. So some books that changed my worldview, made my mind blink. Things Fall Apart. Um, um, a book called Angel by Merle Collins. Was the first time I saw a dialect in print, but it was really the story of what happened in Grenada. And Nalo Hopkinson wrote Brown Girl in the Ring, and that was fun. You know, it was some of it was dialect, but it was like it was a fun, adventurous, tell me a story that's going to keep me, you know, wanting to turn the page. Good. I think many brilliant works are being written, and they are dystopian for real. You know, we are sad, we are crying, we are mourning, we are in grief with one another. And sometimes we need a story that does not make your eyes bleed.
Mm.
I'm going to cheat a little bit because the first one I'm going to put out there, it's not a particular book, it's a particular writer, and that's Elmore Leonard. I thought I knew dialogue until I read Elmore Leonard. I've been reading since I was 5 years old. I discovered Elmore Leonard in my 20s, and he writes the way people talk in real life. I don't know how his editors let him get away with it back then, because no one else was writing like that. So his dialogue is an eye opener for any writer. Even if you don't like crime fiction or Western fiction, you should try something by Elmore Leonard and just read it out loud. You read the characters' conversations out loud. It's like we're talking now. I always point to the Drive-In by Joe Lansdale. It's an unclassifiable novel. You know, people in horror claim it was an influence on them. People in science fiction claim that. Comedy writers claim it. Bizarro writers claim it. It isn't any genre other than Joe R. Lansdale. And it's an early favorite, but it was an important one for me, The Mist by Stephen King. Going back to what you asked earlier, Leslie, you know, sense of place. How does a sense of place inform the story? The Mist as a novella doesn't work without that supermarket. You know, the characters are all trapped in the supermarket as the end of the world happens outside, and everything they see for the vast majority of the story is through those big plate glass windows at the front of the store. You know, I would argue that the supermarket itself is one of the main characters in the book. So those would be my three. But, you know, you give me 10 minutes, I'll come up with 12 more.
Yeah.
Just thinking about the emails that I used to get from Jesus with just like list of books that I needed to read.
Mm-hmm. You know, actually, and this is an aside, maybe I shouldn't bring it up here live, but maybe some folks will be interested in going through his papers, which were given to the University of Pittsburgh. They're going to feature them in their horror collection. I found lists that he hand wrote in notebooks. I've got a stack of them over here, and they're all going to go in there. But I think before I might actually compile them together and maybe put them on the internet or something, because there's some really good lists. He was a big list maker. You know,
I got some of those lists.
he never, I mean, he did a lot of ghostwriting. He to the best of my knowledge, he never wrote those, you know, those BuzzFeed top 10 listicles, they call them, but he would have been real good at it.
Just, I've been thinking of my three. There's a nonfiction essay collection called Heavy by Kisi Lamon that is just amazing. I shove it at everybody I can find. The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson is just a beautiful, beautiful novel that I absolutely loved. And I'm currently reading Edith Wharton's Ghost Stories, and I'm just find myself rereading phrases. Because the way she would put certain things really was just beautiful. Okay, I could go on talking about books that we're reading forever, but so when you write a culture you're unfamiliar with, where do you start? Or do you not write a culture that you're unfamiliar with?
I do not write cultures that I'm unfamiliar with.
Say more.
I am so easily aggravated when writers get stuff wrong about stuff that I know about. And I know that no culture is a monolith, but some of the things that they get wrong are just too blankety blank basic. And I don't like it. The other thing I don't like is when you introduce a character and you tell us by name or physical attributes that this person is of a particular race, ethnicity, whatever, however you want to characterize them. And then, that's it. They have no other cultural identity, like, oh, I see his brown hand, choking her neck or whatever. But there is the characters are not developed, and that aggravates me. So basically, I kind of feel like, well, keep me out your mouth.
I agree with that so heavily. I F with that so hard. I'm also like a student of writing the other. And so the story that I'm doing actually for this anthology, I had to tap into another culture, and it's been a really powerful experience because the story is told from the perspective of Black women. And so I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of friends, sisters, cousins about experiences that as a man, I'm just not going to have. And I also have these people who are going to be my first readers and my second readers and my third readers, so that I don't go off the rails. But there's also I think first and foremost, there's this love, this appreciation, admiration that I want to come across in the work, and this care that I want to take. I think it's really hard to manufacture that. I think it's really hard to know when you need to be checked. And I don't purport to know when I need to be checked all the time, but I want to get this right so badly. I need to get this right so badly. I need for the people that I've been able to talk to and interview to read it, feel reflected, but also see things in it that aren't them specifically and still feel like it's cohesive. And I don't know if everyone takes that level of care with it. And so 78% of the time I'm with Celeste.
I doubling back agreeing with you, that there is you mentioned the word love, there is a love of the persona that you are creating, whether they are a evil person or not. But I mean, that you want to get it right. You take the care, you double check yourself and your own biases and the way you feel and think and the assumptions that you make. And then you let other people do it too, so that you won't get it inadvertently wrong.
Mm.
And that's really important. And I appreciate that, it can be done and some people do it. Like some people can write cross-culturally and cross-sexually or however whatever
Mhm.
barriers you want to break down. But it is not that often done that, in my opinion, done that well, that it really does not seem like, okay, so we live in a diverse world. And so I can't have all my characters be Black because there's other people, at my school, at my job, at my work, I get that. But being able to put them in authentically, that has to be done to me. I feel like on a very like superficial level, like how, how like kind of like, I don't know if all you have this experience where we are working in a place that has more than one type of ethnic people. But when we all go there, everybody kind of shuts off their own self and no one is really that authentic. We're all trying to be, in our case, American, New Yorkers, whatever the fuck, excuse me,
You're fine.
whoever we
You
are,
went first.
See, that's exactly an example of what I'm trying to say, So we can't, so I'm not attempting that. I'm not really attempting that because I don't know enough about how the smell of your food makes you remember sitting on your mother's lap versus mine. So I ain't going there. Not yet. Maybe one day I will mature enough. But if I feel like I have to learn about you from anthropology books,
Mhm.
then it's not going to be built with love.
Also, you should try writing all Black fantasies because the conflicts are so interesting and there's no racism. It's great.
That's the thing. That's kind of like where I live, Like there are certain issues that I want to talk about, but they don't have to do with white people.
Right. Have a whole life outside of
Exactly.
I don't necessarily care for the term sensitivity reader. I think we can find a better term than that. But I've been using sensitivity readers since like 2005, I guess. I remember the very first book signing tour I did, 2004 for The Rising. Um, I'm a straight white guy from rural Pennsylvania, and I realized by the third signing, holy cow, everybody's reading my books. The people reading these books aren't all just straight rural white guys. So I've kept that in mind ever since then. If the main character is Black, then I run it by somebody and I tell them, feel free to check me, feel free to call me on my shit if I drop the ball here. Probably the most nerve-wracking that ever was a novel called The Complex, which I did back in 2016 because it was a huge cast and a very diverse cast, all with different points of view. It was the first time I had written a trans character. Now, full disclosure, my stepdaughter is trans, and I have trans friends, but obviously I don't know what it's like to look through a trans person's eyes and how I may perceive something one way. To them, it may be a completely different perception. So that book had 8 different sensitivity readers. And, I'm not one of these folks that is hesitant to write about things I don't know about. But if you're going to do that, you damn sure better have somebody check you. And you gotta approach it with respect and dignity and I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say? You know,
Yes.
don't just ham fist it. You know, do it respectfully and do it in a way that treats that culture with dignity and respect.
I've seen a lot of complaints about a lot of recent work that have been published by the big traditional publishers that are they don't have you can't even use the word sensitivity. You just got to use the word stupid, you know, like things that are getting through and being published that just the I would like to say it's a level of incompetence, you know, or ineffectual editing, but you after a while you just look at this mess and you're like, this is some racist bullshit, and it's just getting through. It's getting published over and over and over again. So yeah, sensitivity readers. The first time I heard that term, I was like, ew, you know. But I get it, you know, I get the necessity
Right.
for it, but it's like it's a lot of it is not happening.
And there's you know, if I'm being generous, I'd call it a lack of discernment between, you know, being able to and whether one should do a thing. Um, when you brought that up, it makes me think about like American Dirt, which is a maligning story about Mexican people by someone who is not Mexican. And so what you end up with is like this book with a huge push that no one thought, hey, is anyone in the room? Is there anyone Mexican in the space who's read this book and thought, you know what, this is probably a horrific idea? Um, and I think that's a large part of it. The capacity to do a thing, like, you know, being a publisher is not the same thing as like the wherewithal to do a thing. And we saw this a couple of years ago. God, I'm doing the sound right. We saw this a couple of years ago with the sad story that was Isabel Falls. I sexually identify as an attack helicopter, and I think Isabel Fall was a debut writer. Her first story came out in Clark's World, and it should have been a very exciting time. But people, sorry, I sexually identify as a attack helicopter is also a meme that is popular or was popular at the time, and a lot of trans people took it as trolling and thought that this person was a straight person trolling trans people, not knowing because she was a new writer that she was a trans woman herself. Uh, and the discourse got really ugly. And the blowback was very harmful to Isabel. Um, and then, like a year later, there was an article about her and the story, which told us that she is a trans woman and that, you know, she detransitioned and she, like, there was a lot of like really, but me personally, I wonder if there were some ways in which, as a publisher, she could have been protected. That no one should have this experience. No debut author should come into this space and feel like they're getting roasted by their legends and their peers, and then feeling like they were chased off the internet. Thankfully, this woman is back using a different name that I can't remember at the moment. But the story itself, valid. I think there are a lot of approaches that we can take that forward up and support authors in the ways that are great. But then there's so much support that goes to authors who are doing shitty things and then publishers who are just like, oh, it's here, we can do it. It's like, well, American Dirt shouldn't have happened, and I sexually identify as an attack helicopter deserved to happen in a good way, deserved to be published. I think more often than not, people aren't thinking about what their roles are as shepherds for writers and shepherds for work, and also shepherds for communities. Because if your book does harm, if your story does harm, actively does harm, then what is your responsibility?
I understand what you're saying, but one thing that that I am not sure of is the that we all agree on the intention. You know, like the intention is to put out well-written, entertaining, often informative stories that, as they used to say in medicine, do no harm. You know, I don't believe that anymore. You know, I don't believe that it's all good intentions out there and they're just making a couple few bad business decisions.
I think in some cases, not all, and I would say not even the majority, but in some cases, it's just overworked staff and young staff who are still trying to navigate and learn this business themselves. But in some cases, it's right there up front. Leslie knows this story. I'll tell the rest of y'all. I remember before Jesus Gonzalez died, one of the big five wanted he and I to ghostwrite for an action series using a house pseudonym. And they invited us up to New York to go to dinner with the editor. And this is within the last 15 years. So it's recent. So we go to have dinner with the editor, and I bring my wife, my girlfriend at the time, Mary San Giovanni, along, also an accomplished author as well. And the editor said one thing to her all night, and that was at the start of the dinner. He pointed out that he thinks women are ruining horror. And that was it. Didn't talk to her the rest of the night. I wanted to get up and leave right then. But we really needed money. So Mary and Jesus were like, no, sit down, calm down. He's old, you know. So, you know, he wants us to write this action franchise. And basically we pitched him Die Hard at the Baltimore Inner Harbor. And, you know, it's this burned out cop and this Uber driver have to team up to take the terrorists down. And well, no, and our bad guys were white supremacists. And no, they can't be white supremacists. Could you make them illegal immigrants? Like, could they have come up over the border from Mexico? Keep in mind, the man sitting next to me is Jesus Gonzalez, whose father came across the border illegally from Mexico. And then I'm like, surely Mary and Jesus will let me go off on this guy now. No, Jesus is like, yeah, we could do that. But then we got out of there and he's like, no, we're not going to do that. I just didn't want to see you punch the guy at the table. But as I said, this is in recent living memory. So I think in some cases, you know, what Celeste was talking about, there's still people that have that attitude. But I do think in some cases, it's just that there's younger editorial staff and they're not as experienced and they're still learning how to navigate all this too. You know, in the case of what you were talking, LP, I remember that, and I remember the article that came out a year later, and it was heartbreaking. And yes, the publisher should have stepped in and helped, but I remember the wildfire on the internet. I don't know that anybody could have done anything to quell that. I mean, it was one of those things that seem to happen now in 2023 where it, you know, where it goes viral, and it's unfortunate. But
it became this weird thing because later on, one of the people who was very verbal about the story being trolling ended up getting targeted and chased off the internet in the exact same way that Isabel Fall felt chased off the internet. And I'm just like, I don't understand how a group of people angry that this thing happened could turn around and do the exact same thing to a different person. And but like this is this is what it is, and like I don't know if the publisher could have fixed it. I just felt very sad because there was no I think there could have been things that I would have done as a person who does community organizing at SFF around Blackness, would be like, hey, how can we organize community around this conversation that we're having about this story? So right, rather than like we can include this author in a conversation with other trans authors about the experience of being written into stories, and then have a conversation, like let it be something productive instead of something that's destroying people. And look, who knows if I would have thought of this that I just thought of during this panel, like because of what you said in that moment. But I think that there are ways. There are ways. We can all figure it out. And I agree that some of it is younger editors, but I also think that some of it is people who don't necessarily have the experiences with a range of identities that they don't belong to.
Right.
And, you know, being there's just a lot of not knowing. But like I think at this point in time, particularly with the way that the internet is built at the moment, I think people are really afraid to be wrong in public, because I think sometimes people feel like you can't recover from being wrong in public. And I think that if we aren't wrong in public, if we don't acknowledge being wrong in public, then we can never grow or afford space for other people to learn and grow, be wrong in public, fix views or choices. We see it a lot in people's inability to apologize, right?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I think a lot of that fear of being wrong in public is that immediate backlash that is so quick to come nowadays on the internet. And you can see how, I mean, we all work in speculative fiction. We see it it feels like it's over and over and over and over again. And you just kind of get to the point where you feel like you're holding your breath at all times of like, what is going to be the next like flashpoint that's going to set a huge wave off, where somebody, you know, did something that they should be, you know, either did something they should learn and grow from, but they don't have that chance. Like it's hard to learn and grow when you're immediately being attacked. And it's just, sometimes I think we all need to take a collective breath and just pause for a second and really figure out, like you said, have a conversation, come together as a community rather than like burning it all down.
Mm-hmm.
This panel got way heavier than I
Yeah, but it's good though. It's good. You know, can I add something to that? Because this is a good discussion. This is now the panel topic. You know, one thing I have had to teach myself. I've been doing this almost 30 years now, and you know, I have to remind myself I'm not writing for 50 people or 100 people anymore. You know, I'm privileged enough to have a large audience, and that large audience is ride or die for me. And sometimes that's a double-edged sword. If you know, somebody decides to troll me on Twitter, for example, and I take the time to poke back at them, I've potentially opened their feed up to 26,000 other people. Oh, let's go. Let's deliver a beatdown for Brian. And no. You know? So I have to, social media for me, I don't enjoy it at all anymore. It's all performative at this point, because I have to be mindful of everything I say to every person, because of that potential backlash where maybe backlash wasn't warranted. Maybe somebody says, you know, Brian Keene, I didn't care for your book. Oh, okay, well, you know, thank you for buying it. But even that can become a flashpoint now. So it's something I try to stay mindful of daily. And most days I do well. Sometimes someone catches me on a bad day and I slip.
I don't give a fuck about these bitches. I will light you up. I will light you up if you need to be lit up. This is. There have been times where I've had to intervene on conversations where I was like, "This is not. We're not doing this." Like there was a dog pile I was watching. I was like, "No, absolutely not." And if you feel some kind, and thank God, I'm relatively known to be exuberant and have a sharp tongue, but also people are afraid of being in a position where they're arguing with the black man about like marginalization, and I'm able to wield that as a privilege, which is a first. It's the only place in my life where that's the case. But like shutting things down when they need to get shut down and saying things with my full chest because I'm going to say them with my full chest. I recognize that the things that I write don't necessarily fit into what people think about as polite conversation. And so with that full awareness, I write what I write, and I know the people who want to publish it, and like I'm writing to that. But like there's a question farther down in our thing about like writing to the mainstream, and I was thinking about that earlier. It's like I don't write to the mainstream. I think that my conversations are almost always to Black and or queer people, and so my stories are always to Black and or to queer people. Now, does that mean that they are inaccessible, that another person of a different experience cannot witness and draw something powerful from it? No, not at all. It's there. But the idea, I've had stories rejected because I used vernacular, or because the tradition that I'm using. My last story to publish outright was me playing with the idea of oral tradition, and people bounced off The Voice. Flip side of that, this year it was nominated for an Ignite Award. So it's like, okay, I mean, great, bounce off The Voice if you want to, but like I'm not aiming for everyone. I'm aiming for the people who are going to get it, and then some other people are going to get it too, but like meh.
See, but as an editor, I want the different voice because I don't want the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's why I'm growing out of the meek young lady that I used to be, and I'm growing into my I don't give a shit 40s. And things that I used to be on social media that I would just be like, just don't respond. Just don't respond. When people are being asinine and that they're just trying to get a rise out of you. More and more often, I'm like, oh no, I will respond. And lately, the latest was somebody, we recently did a call for more slush readers for Apex Magazine, and we were looking for BIPOC and LGBTQ readers because we already have 20 some readers and it's heavily skewed cis white. And we wanted to fix that because we need a wide variety of readers, because that makes us better, And so we had this person who was trying to argue, and I was like, don't worry, I got it. And when the person was made some comment, I said, well, you've made it very clear you don't actually read the magazine. He was like, well, maybe, but respond anyways. And I'm like, no, you've wasted enough of my time. Like, you're being an asshole just to be an asshole. Like, so yeah, I kind of enjoyed that this period where I will say what's on my mind.
Yeah. I definitely miss that because I love to invite people to fuck around so they can find out. If I had seen that, I'd have been right in those Twitter streets, letting someone know about the disparities. But it's funny though, because like I think in a lot of cases, slush readers are trained to disqualify versus like look for innovation. And so it can be really challenging to find really great pieces because you don't know what people's individual tastes are going to bounce off of.
Mhm.
And that could be challenging. But you know, I think every story also finds its home, even if it's in a collection.
Would like to think that, but I don't think that. I
Even
don't
if
think
it's,
eh?
even if it's in a collection.
Nah.
You don't have like a trunk story that you can sell anywhere. You're like, you know, I believe in this story. I'm gonna put this in my collection and I'm gonna show these bitches.
Well, yes, of course, I always have that, but I don't think every story will find a home. No. I think that a lot. I think we're missing so much, from people who maybe just kind of like eye this industry and be like, I ain't jumping in that water. Like, what am I going to get for it? At the most, $250. Like, you can't, most people, can't pay their rent or their light bill, so I think that there's so much work that we are not privy to because people are reluctant to send it out because they don't think it's going to get published anyway. And then you have the gatekeepers who don't let it get published. So I don't think every story has a home. But I do wish that, I personally wish that everybody who is writing submit far and wide, submit to people who you think they ain't even gonna, as back in the day when I started, they ain't even gonna open the envelope, or like Sari taught me that long time ago. She said, send it to the New Yorker. And my eyes was like, why is he talking about? Like that doesn't even make sense, And this was it back in the day when you literally had to do stamps and a mail and a self-addressed envelope, So it cost money to submit. But
Yeah.
I think that we always should submit because A, as my daughter says, you never count on, you never know. But B, people, the reason she said that is because they need to know what they're missing. So I really believe in submitting far and wide. I know you had one of those questions about how does submissions work? What do I feel about acceptance, rejections rates based on, the kind of work that I do and especially the dialect and, often writing from a Caribbean setting and location and perspective. I have no idea, I don't know because I'm not like, yes, I keep a submission spreadsheet, so I know how many times I get rejected, and from where, but I don't think I would ever put in the effort to try to figure that out because that's counterproductive for me.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm on the other side of the fence in that slush pile every single day. And it always breaks my heart when an author will respond to a rejection and ask, well, should I give up? Like, should I quit submitting to Apex? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, please keep submitting. I think that especially for newer writers, sometimes it's hard for them to wrap their head around exactly what the slush pile looks like. Like we're open 11 months out of the year and we get between 800 and 1200 submissions every month. And we publish every other month and I can only publish 20,000 words worth of fiction. So those are harsh numbers, harsh numbers. But I'm still cheering for every story. Like I want, especially if I see a name come up over and over and over again, because they keep submitting, like, I'm like, ooh, maybe this one will be the one. And I love when I can finally send that acceptance. Like it's this right story that fits what I need. And I can finally send that acceptance and I can look and I can be like, oh, well, this is their like 15th or 16th or 20th submission. Like that is the best feeling from my end. Not that I want it to get that far, but I love that they didn't give up or lose hope. So when I get those questions, like, you know, I get those questions from authors like, should I quit submitting? My answer is always like, no, please don't, because you never know what story, like you're saying, submit widely. You never know what story is going to work because you don't know what's on the other side of the desk. Like, you know, it could be that your story is the perfect one that fits a tone and is the right word length for a whole that the editor is looking at with dread, going, how am I going to find the piece that will fit this whole? And then your story comes through and it's like an automatic yes, because it fits, it checks all those boxes. Whereas, you know, if it doesn't check those boxes, it could just be like, not that I didn't love that story, LP, but it's not fitting, you know, whatever it is that what hole I'm looking to fill. Because like I'm at this point, I'm scheduling out in May and July of next year. But like I have holes in some of like in the March issues still where I'm going, I need things that's like very specific. So it's just like there's so many things.
Can you give us an example of that, like a hole that you need to fill? Like I've never done any kind of editing or making an anthology or whatnot. So how do you what do you think of when you think of putting together these pieces, this collection? Like,
okay, this collection is easier because like we know exactly how many stories we're gonna have in the end, and we know that like what the word limit is, so we know what the maximum word limit for the anthology is going to be. Cherie and I will go through and read all of your all stories first. That way we know where it's located, like, you know, does it have like an angry ghost haunting a tree or whatever, you know, like certain things, because I don't want 5 stories that hit upon the same exact theme or the same exact place. So then it's like once we have those, when we're reading the submissions, we can go through and be like, okay, well, this one is different than Celeste's story, but tonal wise, it fits really well with that. So maybe we would want to put those stories close together in the anthology. With the magazine, it's a little bit, it's easier now because I've decided, it used to be we did 24,000 words of original fiction and I had to have 6 stories. And if I have a habit of falling in love with really long stories, like give me a chunky story and I just love it. But if I have a 7,500 word story and I only have 24,000 words, that takes a huge chunk. So I would always end up with this like weird 2,000 word blank space where I had to find a short story that would fit in. And so then I would go through the slush pile, like reading all the short ones, trying to fill that, like find a story that fits with the other stories that are already in this, you know, in this magazine, but also fits that weird word length. But I have decided to do away with that starting in January. We're not doing 6 stories per issue anymore. I'm putting together whatever stories fit together to hit my word goal without going over. Which is why we're opening up to stories that are 9,000 words long, because I want those longer, chunkier stories, but I couldn't do it before if I had to hit 6.
Right.
Understand. Thank you.
Like noted.
I know. January 1st, we're going to get this flood. This is why we needed more slush readers, because we're going to get this flood of like super long stories.
like novelettes galore.
And I'm just going to be on the other end like, yes,
My
all
pleasure.
novelettes. All right, so I don't even know where we are in our questions. What are some of your favorite works, any length, any media, books, short stories, TV, or movies that rely on non-Western myth and histories or that use non-Western structures?
I have one that I read about a year ago. It's called August Town by
Mm.
Kai, and it's about a town, a village, and a preacher. I might not have his religious designation exactly right, whether he's a preacher or a reverend, or I don't know Christianity that well to be able to tell you, what exactly his position was. But anyway, he was a church man, and right. But although I was raised Catholic, so that's all I can tell you. But the and then it's one of those stories of ours, that is it true? Is it not true? Is it fantasy? Is it the Go Foot Man? Like, did this really happen? Did it like, but this is something that, you grow up um with, like, not like I didn't know this story, but like growing up with the belief that science don't know everything, and so some of the things that we are afraid of, other people may think are impossible. So that was a really good read for me.
I just keep writing down everything you guys mentioned. You're feeding my addiction to read everything.
Yeah,
And
you're
it's
gonna have
I struggle with this. I there's a series that I want to read, but I'm not willing to start it until all 3 books are out.
Oh,
And it's I think it's called the Black Star trilogy by uh he's Jamaican. Oh my god. Um
not Marlon.
yes, Marlon James. There we go. So Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and Moon Witch and Spider King, I believe, is the second one.
Hmm.
From what I can understand, it's a tough read. There's child rape very early on in it, which is usually a big nope for me. But I've also had people tell me that the way that he uses the way that he tells the story is very recursive. Reminds me, the way that it was explained to me was that, like, when I'm telling the story to my sister, it's like, okay, so you remember, so I was out with so and so. Now you remember the time that she did X, Y, Z, right? All right, that she did that, right? So now I'm out with her. We're up top and we're doing this thing, and then this person shows up. Now let me tell you about him really quickly before I go to this, and then right. And that's the way it's been explained to me, and I'm like, huh, I think this is something I want to read just to see how that works on paper. Um, because that's how stories were told where I'm from in Chicago. Um, and I didn't know that anyone else told stories that way.
I thought we all did.
We don't all tell. That's definitely not Western storytelling. It's definitely not Western storytelling. And if it's one of those things where, like, if you pay attention to it, when I pay attention to it, I was like, oh, this is actually something. So it's like I spent time learning to write, and I was like, well, maybe I should spend time learning to listen.
I really like Mame Dean's stuff. Clash Books does a lot of US copies of his books. Very,
Can you say that name
very
again? Who is that? Who are you talking about?
uh I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of his name. Mame, M-A-M-E, Bugama D-I-E-N-E. None of it is Western based. It's all horror, and it hits. Another one, I actually killed my camera so I could go get them. Sola, I'm gonna put it up there so folks can write it down. He's a Nigerian writer. The only 2 books of his I've been able to find are the one I held up, The Living and the Dead, and this short story collection, Dark Visions. Um, his stuff is based in Nigerian horror folklore, and so different than anything being produced here in the States, and so effective. So those are the two that I would particularly shout out off the top of my head.
Is it different because of the cultural monsters or the myths in there, or is it different because um there are different concepts of what is horrific?
I think both of those things. I mean, speaking from the perspective of a fan and a reader, it's neat to get some monsters and demons that you're just completely unfamiliar with, particularly growing up in rural Pennsylvania. But yeah, on a deeper level, you nailed it. Their concept of what constitutes horror and what is actually horrific culturally can be quite different than what we experience here in Western culture. Nigeria, they live with some pretty horrific shit every day. So it hits me on an emotional level that way as well as a reader.
I think we have time for one more question.
And thank you, Leah. I see Leah type Mame's name out for me there in the chat. So.
I actually had a chance to talk with Mame. I think we did it as an Instagram live, and fascinating, absolutely wonderful conversation. And like I said, I think it was on Instagram live. So it's not like we can go back. I don't think anybody could find it, but it was because we had a reprint of his in the magazine. That is just wonderful, and getting to kind of really delve into the writing style, because it's this like epic horror story and like sci-fi horror story that plays over like a whole generation in a short story, which you don't see a whole lot. So it was wonderful getting to talk to him and be like, how did you decide, like, I'm going to tackle this gigantic concept, but it's a short story. I mean, it's a long short story, but as we've learned, I love long stories. But yeah, it was wonderful getting to talk to him and just kind of see why he decided to make this story. Because most of the time when you're doing a story, it's can be kind of narrow. Like, yeah, you might be talking about a bigger concept, but you're talking about a narrow incident. And this just was an entire generation, and done super, super well. All right, so one more question. How does a character's culture affect your prose? Like dialect, metaphor, rhythm, that sort of stuff. How does the culture affect how you write the prose?
I can
Me
answer that.
personally, I'm sorry, Celeste. I didn't mean to go over top of you.
I was saying I can answer that really quickly and easy. It just does. If it's a black woman or a black man, if they're in the South, the North, in the Caribbean, the story is based on who the person is and what language, dialect they speak. So yeah, I always do that. So I'm not a good one to get a comprehensive learning answer from. So I out.
Yeah, same. A recent example, my short novel With Teeth. It's set in rural West Virginia, and the whole point of the novel is addressing rural Appalachian poverty. And the way the characters talk, the dialect, the grammar. The copy editor had a field day and wanted to change everything. I'm like, no, that's all accurate. We're gonna keep it that way.
As someone from West Virginia, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
In a lot of my long form work, I've been playing again with collectivism and the idea of like stories having a cumulative effect. And so the way that plays out for me is that different stories obviously need to be told in different ways, and that can be a conversation about atmosphere, about diction, about tense, about point of view. And in order to really contrast these characters with one another, I spend a lot of time thinking about how to change the voice, so that from chapter to chapter or section to section, you know who is speaking, and you know you know, you might, a person who's not a writer might not have picked up on why they know, but
Yeah.
like, oh, this is so and so, great. And I think, like the way that we were talking, you know, most of us come up with I come with concept and then character, then location, but character then location is the way that some people work. And um, there's no way to bring character into the conversation so early on and not have who that person is affect the way that they see the world, communicate about the world, people communicate to them about the world. Um, and when it's not, it's lazy writing. And I'm not indicting anyone other than myself.
You know me.
Sorry?
I said, you picking on me. I was just making a joke.
I'm picking on me.
He's picking on me too.
When you were saying that, LP, immediately it made me think of the book Train Spotting by Irvine Welsh, which I attempted to read about 20 years ago. Every chapter, it's all in first person, a wide cast of characters, and every chapter is a different character, but they don't tell you what character it is. So like I would spend like half the chapter like being like, whose perspective is this? So I need to go back and try to read it again now as somebody who has read more widely, and maybe I'll be able to comprehend it. But when I read it, I was like, I'm too stupid to read this book. I have to stop.
I want to add something onto this. There's a book I've been trying to read, and like people really love it apparently because like it's really structurally like interesting. But for me, it forgets that in order for me to get to a point where I can read the structure, I need to, on a sentence level and a micro conflict level and on a character level, care to give a goddamn before like the structure will mean anything to me. And like people are really like flipping tits about this book, and I'm just like, I'm 3 hours in and I want those 3 hours back. So I think voice, the way that character influences a place, a space, a thing, it can be a really good hook. It can be the draw that holds a reader, holds me as while I'm writing it until the interesting stuff happens, right? Like an interesting character showing up and doing something kind of interesting, sort of interesting, mildly interesting, can do so much to build goodwill between a writer and a reader. And I think sometimes we forget. I thank God that I'm not academic, and I don't mean that as shade, but I do think that sometimes stories and writers can be very much in love with how clever they can be and how smart they can be with a story, and they lose track of the heart, or they lose track of the reader's attention, or the reasons that we read books, because they did this upside down structure or something. And I'm like, we're people.
Mm-hmm.
We're people. We're reading, and like, if you don't keep me, I don't care what your name is.
I wholeheartedly agree. If I
All of that.
find myself probably about 50 pages in is where I do that gut check of like, do I care? Like, do I care what's enough to keep going? And I mean, I've been known to drop a book after like the first page because I'm just like, I'm not vibing with the way this is told right now. Now, that does not mean I won't go back to it and love it. And,
Okay.
it depends. Some days I can read for hours and I have all the brain space. And some days I need you to spoon feed me the plot
Mhm.
because I can't handle trying to figure anything out. But it really does matter, just where I am and do I care? If I care, I'll work for it. If I don't care, most of the time I won't work for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I vibe with this.
All right, well, we are closing in on an hour and a half. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for saying yes to be in Cherie and I's anthology because I am super excited to get your stories. I'm super excited to see this book come together. Just a reminder for anyone who is watching, we are still currently kickstarting this project. And we're at we're 2/3 of the way there towards our goal. I am really hoping that we hit our goal and we can start unlocking some of those stretch goals because the thing I'm really excited about is Linda Addison has said she would write our introduction, and I
Nice.
want that introduction. So, yeah, if you've not backed the Kickstarter, I hope that you will back it and come on this journey with us to explore all of these wonderful places. And again, thank you all for being part of the anthology and for being here today to chat with me. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've known Brian for years, but it's been wonderful to meet you, Celeste and LP, in like virtual space. But thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Also, one of the stretch goals that got added because I ran into Tree a couple weeks ago is I will write a song,
Yes.
write and sing a song for someone. But we
I'm
got to
gonna
get
add a
past.
stretch goal right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna add a stretch goal live on air, and Linda's gonna beat my ass for this later. But if we hit that Linda Addison intro stretch goal, I will post. I've got about a dozen pictures of young Linda and young Brian hanging out together that have never been put online. I mean, we look like babies in these. I still had hair back then.
We might have to have a conversation about enthusiastic consent first.
Linda's going to be like, I didn't say yes to that.
I love you, Linda. You know that.
So number one, first and foremost, let's get this bad boy funded.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the final product. I'm ready to start reading stories. But thank you guys so much. Bye.